Welcome to Boom, where we have
Biomechanics on our minds.
Boom.
Boom, boom, boom.
Boom.
Today, we are talking with Professor Nadia Azar. Nadia is the Associate Professor of Kinesiology at the University of Windsor. Thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we're really excited to get into your research and more about what you do. But let's go back to the beginning and start with, when did you first know you wanted to be a biomechanist?
Oh, I don't know that I have an answer to that. I was always kind of drawn to the biomechanics aspect of kinesiology. I had kind of debated many different fields, engineering being one of them, and I was just kind of always drawn to it, and I was just really interested in the mechanics of human movement, and I just kind of stuck. And so I went on to do my master's more from, occupational biomechanics, so like the ergonomics slant to that. And then continued in my PhD with a bit of a transition into engineering, but it was biomedical engineering, so there was a really nice overlap between kinesiology and engineering. It was really kind of like the perfect spot. But yeah, I don't know. Once I got into my undergrad, I was started to be drawn towards the ergonomics and biomechanics classes. So.
Was there anything specific in those classes like that you loved or loved learning, or that like what made you stay?
Well, I think most people who go into kinesiology, I went in thinking I was probably going to be a physiotherapist, and determined that I didn't necessarily want the clinical side of it, although nowadays I kind of wish I did have that too. But I was drawn to the concept of like helping people rehabilitate from injuries or prevent injuries from happening. And so, to do that, you have to know how they happen. And that's the mechanics of injury. And so that's just sort of where I ended up going down that rabbit hole, and staying there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that with us. I think that is such an interesting draw about the field, and then it's cool to see these different overlaps between kinesiology and engineering. So you have different backgrounds, but you can see that overlap and definitely support each other. Can you tell us a little bit about the current projects going on in your lab?
Yeah, we have several going on right now, which is fantastic. So right now, all but one of them involve drummers, because that's kind of our main focus. So yeah, which is really fun. So I've finally been able to resurrect the heart rate and energy expenditure during live performance study. So I go to shows, I put body media armbands and a polar heart rate monitor on the drummers. They wear them during the show, and then I go and analyze the data, which is super fun for so many reasons. So that's finally back up and running. But we also
are the armbands where you're getting energy expenditure? Are you estimating that from heart rate? Typically, you don't usually use like oxygen consumption masks and things, but I'm sure that they don't want to be wearing those types of things while they're performing. Exactly.
Although I've had a few who were like, "I'll wear whatever you want." But
that's awesome.
Yeah. No, so ideally, yes, we would use the Cosmed or some other like similar, metabolic, like that route for estimating energy expenditure, because it is the most valid way of doing it. But I use the armbands because they are easy to wear during a show. They're not distracting. There's no cables. There's they forget that they're wearing them once they're on. So, there may be some trade-offs with accuracy there. Certainly there would be trade-offs with doing it through heart rate predicted energy expenditure as well. There are some issues with that. So knowing that, but these are what I feel are the most appropriate way to do it for, given the parameters of the data collection setting that I'm working in. So we use those armbands. So yeah. So
cool.
So that's the one study. We're also doing one where we are monitoring vibration exposure while playing the drums. So we attach an accelerometer to the back of the hand, and they play a few songs. Then we move it to the other hand. Because we only have the one that conforms to the ISO standards for monitoring vibration. So we have to do each hand individually. But they play, and we get vibration exposure data that way. We're doing one where we're monitoring muscle activation patterns while they're playing of the upper limb and the trunk muscles. And then we just started recruiting for the drum set instructor interview study, where I'm interviewing drum teachers about the reasons why they do or don't teach their students about playing related injuries and how to prevent them, and what sort of supports they feel that they might need to either start doing it or to do a better job of it. So we just had our first sets of interviews this week for that one. So finally getting out and going
Cool. Yeah, so you're collecting so many different, so you're looking at energy expenditure, you said muscle activations and vibration patterns. Where do you see this data going after that? Like how do you then, what are you learning from that data, and what are you applying it to, I guess, what would be the next steps after that?
So the energy expenditure and heart rate data was a bit of a gateway to, it kind of came out of nowhere for that study, sort of landed in my lap as an opportunity and ran with it. But it turned into a really neat way to showcase how hard drummers are actually working up there, and how physical and physically demanding their job actually is. And so that kind of translates into, here's how hard they're working. Well, that comes with all kinds of ramifications for injuries and injury prevention. So that kind of feeds into, that's sort of like an awareness raising study. And the drummers also love it because they get their own personal information about their own physiology while they're playing. So it's kind of, good for individuals participating. The other studies, what I'm hoping to show with those, particularly the vibration study, is, we're trying to hone in on some of the mechanisms for the injuries that we see reported most often. So a few years ago, I did an online survey asking drummers all over the world about their experiences with playing-related musculoskeletal disorders. And I asked them whether they'd had a diagnosis from a medical professional, and if so, what was it? And the most common ones that came up were tendinitis and carpal tunnel syndrome. So vibration exposure is a known risk factor for those two injuries. So I wanted to document it so that we can start making the links between where some of these injuries might be coming from. So we've done some studies with 3D kinematics of the upper limb to look at posture and repetition. Repetition's obvious. We didn't need a study for that. It's pretty easy to see repetition in a drummer. But, we've documented extreme postures in the wrist, which is, clearly indicative of, or certainly could be related to the development of those injuries. The vibration is another piece that could be leading to that as well. So knowing, again, you can't prevent an injury until you know how it happens. And so if we're starting to make these links of here's where this might be happening, now we can start taking steps to helping people prevent them. So whether that's through equipment design or playing technique or, different recommendations for other things that we can make, we might be able to start help prevent these injuries or reduce their severity. And by making people aware of them, that these are possibilities, when they start feeling things happening in their wrists, they're less likely to ignore it and more likely to take it seriously and think, okay, I need to do something about this. So that's the hope for where this goes.
I'm curious with that last point, and I love that you said you were interviewing instructors to learn why they might not be sharing this information with people they're teaching. How about those instructors or regular drummers? Like, are they aware? Like, what is the awareness level currently around these injuries?
Yeah, so that the interview study came out of, again, some of the data from that survey. So I had asked the participants whether they had taken formal lessons, and if so, whether they had been taught anything by their instructors about injuries and injury prevention. And overwhelmingly, the answer was no. I think around 80%, 82% of the participants, and we're talking about like 830 people. So it was a big response pool. Yeah. So 82% said they had taken formal lessons, but only about 42% of that 82% said they were taught anything about it. And when I dug down into the data further, the ones who were taught about it were reporting injuries at lower rates than the ones who were not taught about it, even if they had been taking formal lessons. So just taking lessons and like learning proper technique was not necessarily enough to prevent an injury. There was this link between a teacher who specifically addressed it with them and reductions in reporting injury. So I wanted to know why teachers weren't teaching about it. If it's, since there seemed to be, again, it was a cross-sectional study, so I can't say cause and effect, but there seemed to be this link that people who were taught specifically about injury prevention reported injuries less often. So my thinking was, well, I need to know why they're not doing it so that I can help them do it, or somebody can help them do it. Is it because they themselves weren't taught anything about it, so they don't know? Is it because they don't know where to get resources? Is it because they, would it help to have this being taught in music education programs so that they have resources and knowledge going into teaching? I don't know the answer yet. So that's why I wanted to talk to instructors specifically about why do they or don't they, and what do they need to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's nice to sort of quantify that more, and then I feel like that can lead to an easier conversation and just better dissemination of that information. And sometimes I think it's just, like you're saying, as simple as not simple, but just sharing how common these injuries are, and also that like it's not necessarily normal to feel pain or be in pain. Like I think sometimes like we just assume like we're just like, oh, that's just what happens, but there are actually things that you can do. And for me, it's so interesting to hear how you're quantifying these mechanics of drumming and how they're relating to injury. And I think that must be really motivating for people too, to then know that like, oh, there are things that I can do to help prevent this, and there are reasons why this is happening. So it's really exciting to see that.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to work on some really fulfilling research projects in my career. But this one in particular this is one of two that have been like the most, I would think, personally fulfilling, I would say, because the group that I'm working with is so invested in it. I mean, for these studies, I have rarely had, trouble recruiting. One or two, especially during COVID, and some that where they have to come to Windsor. But I'll post about a study and I'll get responses from people in the UK and in Texas, and they go, "Oh, I'd love to participate. Can I do it?" It's like, well, you got to come to Windsor, So, and obviously, I don't have the funding to bring them all in. I wish, but so they're really invested. They're really excited about it. I get a lot of, I can't believe someone is finally studying this. This is so great, that sort of thing. So it's really nice. And it's really nice to hear from drummers who are like, I read this and now I know about this, or now I can teach this to someone, or, they appreciate the information. And it's really nice to work with a group who's just that motivated to be a part of it and contribute to it too. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I love when the tool is education, right? Like it's one thing when we build a tool and then like you can only disseminate that tool, but when you can disseminate a tool that's education, right, then it can kind of be paid forward in that way that you're
the
talking
trickle
about.
down effect.
Exactly.
There's so much potential for it. So it's really exciting to be doing that.
Melissa and I were at a music festival called Outside Lands this past weekend, watching lots of different drummers, and so
Awesome.
It's so cool, to think about what were their mechanics, and watching them, sometimes they do a solo. You're just like you're like, how is this like happening? And they're dripping sweat, like thinking about the metabolic cost of drumming, like.
It really is fascinating. It's like the motor control involved is really mind-boggling when you get into things like limb independence, and they can be playing different time signatures. I don't know how familiar either of you are with music, but like different timing of rhythms with all four limbs. They're doing completely different things, but it's all working together, and it's amazing that they can make that happen. I don't know how they control that up there. I'd love to do an EEG on a drummer. at some point.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was trying to learn my first song on the drums a couple months ago, and you're like, it's one thing to like get the arms going, and then like your hands, are playing different beats, and then it's like, okay, and then you bring in your feet, and I'm like, okay, this is too much. I'm like, wow, I just have so much respect. Like, how do you, like you're saying, hold so many different time signatures in your head at the same time, and they're all synced in some way. It's just amazing.
It really is. So you're playing. That's exciting. Very cool.
I've almost learned a song, a very beginner song, but it's very, I feel very cool playing the drums. I don't know if I look as cool. I think I look pretty stiff. But I'm curious. From your work now, are there specific recommendations then that you found or that you share in your education for drummers for them to keep in mind to avoid future injury or to perhaps take care of current or ongoing injuries?
Yeah, so one thing I come across a lot is warming up and cooling down, and how rarely drummers do those things. Or they'll warm up, but it'll be, a little bit on a practice pad, but they don't, a drummer will start a show without having done like a full body warm up, and, giving them this data. It's like, look, what you're doing is on par with like professional athletes. You're getting your heart rate up so high. You need to prep your body and your systems for that. So trying to teach them to, you got to do some jogging on the spot, some dynamic stretching, and then get on your practice pad to warm up. So working on that, some recommendations about setting up the drum set. I've talked to several drummers who have had shoulder injuries from putting their crash cymbals out really, really high and far away. So they have these like huge and forceful arm motions. So they've got really like non-neutral postures, a lot of force going through it. And so I recommend to them to bring stuff in that's closer so that you're maximizing the efficiency of your movement, setting up your muscles to be at their best mechanical advantage, producing, the most force for the least effort, and doing it in a way that's not putting all that force through a joint that's like at full extension or, at the end range of motion, that sort of thing. And it's really neat because one of the sort of tenets of playing the drums is, you want to play relaxed. You don't want extra muscle tension. You don't want to be like death grip on the sticks and things like that. And now with the vibration data having, even more sort of, there's another reason for them to do that. Like, not only does it feel better and sound better, but you're actually protecting yourself. When you play stiff, you're allowing more of that vibration to transmit into your arm, which could cause some problems. So by playing more relaxed, it's just one more reason why it's better for you to do that. So your teachers were right. And here's the proof. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow, thanks. That's super helpful to all our drummers out there, all our listeners who are drummers. And I loved what you said early in that you're explaining to them they're expending the amount of energy like a professional athlete would. And on your website, you talk about viewing drummers through multiple perspectives, right, as athletes and as workers. And so we thought that was really interesting, and we'd just like you to like touch a little more on that, like how do those views differ and what does it mean in the context of designing these experiments and performing them?
Yeah, so basically the way I kind of envision it is taking the principles from sports science and from occupational biomechanics and applying those to drummers is essentially what it is. So when I'm, like, for example, the vibration study, there are multiple studies looking at, hand-arm vibration associated with industrial tasks, whether that's, hammering or using power tools or, jackhammer, vibration, all that kind of stuff, right? All of that is out there. So it's not like I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm taking what's already known and saying, well, what does that look like in this context? And just, a lot of the things that we've done are things that people have already done in industrial or athletic settings, and we're just doing the same thing but with drummers to show that, what you're doing is very physical, and very physical things have consequences, but there are also ways to prepare your body to handle those physical things. So, by showing them that their heart rates are getting up there with professional athletes, it's like, okay, you need to think about yourself in this context. You may not consider yourself an athlete, but you're demanding something of your body that is athletic, and it needs to be prepared to do that. So professional athletes don't just get out on the court or the field or the ice and play their game. And they also don't just practice their sport-specific skills. They do strength and conditioning. They do a lot of things. They see athletic therapists. They do a lot of stuff to prepare their bodies to handle their sport. And yours as a drummer, it's no different. So yes, you need to play your shows. Yes, you need to practice your chops. But yes, you also need to do some physical conditioning and probably see an athletic therapist to deal with any issues that you're having, or potentially for some taping that might help for a show, or things like that. So it's sort of just getting people to shift their perspective about being a musician is both an athletic and occupational task, and so that's the perspective that we're trying to bring.
I wonder, so when you're saying seeing athletic trainers, I'm wondering if athletic trainers would be prepared to take care of a drummer or musician who needs this type of injury, or has fighting against this type of injury, I guess. It'd be really amazing to see. Actually, when we were preparing for your interview, I was thinking about also marching band and other musicians who really probably could use athletic trainers, but then I think about the athletic trainers at school, and it's for more of the other sports, I guess, and it's interesting to think about having athletic trainers for drummers and musicians.
Yeah, so I have heard anecdotally from several drummers and just musicians in general that it is hard. It's historically been hard to find medical professionals who understand the demands of various, not just drummers, musicians in general. So performing arts medicine has been a growing field over the last 40 or so years, basically focusing on getting physical therapists, physicians, occupational therapists, whoever it is, specific training and understanding in the performing arts, and how what those physical demands look like, because it's not useful to, you would never have a physiotherapist who told an athlete well, you've got some tendonitis, you should probably just stop playing. Yet drummers and musicians come up against that all the time. So over the years, the field has been trying to raise awareness on that, and more there are more and more clinicians who are gathering skill. Actually, the Performing Arts Medicine Association offers a continuing education, a training certificate in performing arts medicine, essentially. They offer it twice a year, and so practitioners can, and they offer a few different versions actually. There's some for health practitioners, and there's also some for instructors, music educators, to learn about more that they can then translate to their students. But yeah, that has historically been a problem, and so hopefully this, that's maybe another aspect of where this research can go, is in helping the allied health professions learn more about these issues in these musicians, and again, not just drummers, and not just musicians, in all performing artists, dancers, Foley artists, all kinds of different aspects of performing arts that they have very significant physical demands, and we need to find ways to help them work through them and get back to their profession the way we do athletes.
Yeah, I love hearing you've got such a good holistic picture of this, of the challenges here, the opportunities here, and the people here. And I'm curious, it's clear we talked about your technical background before and how interdisciplinary that is. I'm curious where the motivation to do this type of work came from. Why drummers, why musicians? Where did that come from?
So this goes back to where it sort of fell into my lap. So the short story is that it came from a Twitter interaction.
Whoa.
Yeah. So you were commenting on my photos earlier. So one of my favorite bands is Dream Theater, and several years ago, I followed their members online on Twitter and this and that. And I had actually, my husband and I had been to one of their shows, and I was watching their drummer, Mike Mangini, play during the show and thinking, oh my gosh, like how cool would it be if I could get him to come to my lab and I could hook him up with stuff, which is like, yes, I am that big of a nerd that I think about this stuff in my concerts. So
we're trying to get Miley in here, so.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about these things, and then like a week later, Mike tweeted something about being sore from playing the drums, but not because he's hurt, but because it's like a boxing type workout. And I, at the time, wasn't big on social media. I was more of a observer than contributor, but I thought this was too good to pass up. So I responded to him and said, I'm a researcher at the University of Windsor. I would love to study your technique. Message me if you're interested. And he did. And so we started going back and forth with private messages. We had a Skype conversation, and I was like, okay, there's, this could be fun. This is going to be a thing. So I started digging into the literature, and I was floored. I couldn't believe that there was like a handful of studies out of Scandinavian countries. There was a handful of studies by a group in Japan, and that was basically it. So I was like, how can this possibly be? What am I missing? But so I of course checked like 4 different databases to make sure I was covering my bases, and I was like, wow, there's literally a handful of articles on this. Wow. And most of them, if percussionists, not even just on drummers, if percussionists in general were included, there would be, in a study of like 50 participants, there'd be 4 percussionists, and most of those were like marimba players, not drum set. So very, very, very little representation of drummers. There was one study out of the University of North Texas that included, they had, I think, 280. But their group that included drummers also included timpani players. So still not specific to drum set. So I thought, okay, I got to do something about this. And then, so I started, planning some studies. And then a few months later, Mike tweeted again about how many calories he burns during a show. So I messaged him, and I was like, listen, you're guessing based on some other studies. I'm like, I've got this stuff in my lab. Why don't we throw it on during a show and we can get your actual numbers? And so he was into it, and I got to do this. The drummer for the Canadian rock band The Tea Party, Jeff Burrows, lives in Windsor, and he heard about what was going on and wanted to do it too. And so we released his data around the same time as we released Mike's, and the response was huge. And so we just turned it into this study, and now I'm, I think, 41 drummers deep at this point. I think I've got 3 more on the books for sure, and several more who were like, oh, I'll do it, but I don't know when we're coming around. So yeah, it's just kind of snowballed on. So that just became what I do. So yeah.
What a dream.
Yeah, it's pretty outstanding. I still, when I get to do data collection at live shows, because I've always been a music fan, I've always loved going to see live music, and so getting to see the shows from side stage at some of the venues that I've been to like multiple times as a spectator is, it's pretty cool. And getting to learn about the inner workings of like production and touring and that sort of thing has really just been so interesting. I like nothing related to biomechanics at all, but just really interesting things that I get to learn about now too is really cool. So, and I've met so many awesome people through it all. So it's just been so much fun.
Yeah, that is awesome. I know Hannah and I both love live music, so we're like, wow, this is so cool to like find that bridge, and then all of the other amazing things that you learn, and then fast forward a little bit, and just last summer you were awarded you're one of 12 recipients of the Grammy Museum Grant Award or Grant Program. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's an award. It funds music research and sound preservation. Yeah. And I'm curious what the process of being part of that unique funding opportunity has been like.
So it was like any other research funding opportunity. I can't remember how I came across it exactly. I think it was one of my early searches about, how to get funding for music related research. But it took me a while to gather enough like baseline data to be able to make the case for getting funding. But it really worked in much the same way. There was a letter of intent that had to be submitted, and then they shortlisted candidates from there. I don't remember, actually, they didn't even tell us. I don't know how many people were asked to provide the full application. But so you had to submit by, I think, November 1st. In February or late January, I found out that I was shortlisted. I had until late February to submit the full application. And then I found out in June of, I guess it would have been 2021, that I had been awarded the funding. So that was very exciting.
Wow.
Especially because
That's
it's from
so
the
cool
Grammys.
that there's...
It's
I was just going to say, it's so cool. You essentially got a Grammy.
Yeah, I'm like, do you get a little award with that? Yeah.
I was a little sad that I didn't, but I still tell people that I won a Grammy. That's... you can't take that away from me.
Yeah, you can't.
And now today we spoke with someone who won a Grammy.
Probably
so
the first biomechanist to win a Grammy.
I honestly don't know, but maybe.
Well, we really appreciate, we've looked through your social media accounts, and we noticed you have this phrase, aspiring imperfectionists, in the bio of these accounts.
Yes.
And, at Boom, that we love humanizing research. Science is so human, and especially failure. So we're wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about this term, aspiring imperfectionist, and what it means for you.
Oh, yeah. That's so, I think, like many, maybe most people who get into academia and go really far with it, I certainly have perfectionist tendencies, and those are not me. Yeah, and I'm sure that those can be really detrimental to your mental health and your well-being, and they certainly have been in my case. And so through my journey of trying to unlearn some of those perfectionist tendencies that I don't remember where I got. I think it was probably some self-help book that I read that was using the term imperfectionist, and so I came up with aspiring imperfectionist, and I put it there as more of a reminder for me of like it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be really good. There's no such thing as perfect. But actually, it's really funny. I won't say who it was that said this because I don't know if they'd want it, out loud. But it was in a conversation with the lead singer and songwriter for a band that my husband comes with me to a lot of the data collections as my research assistant sometimes, and he was asking. He likes to ask people, how do you know? Because he's a musician as well. He likes to know, how do you know when a song is done? Like when you've written a song, how do you know when it's ready? And one of the people he asked of this said something to the effect of, you do your best, you put things out there, and at some point you just have to say, F it, the essence is there, and let it go. And I was like, that is the energy that I need to bring to every paper, every abstract. I was like, that is so great, because it's true. It's never going to be perfect and done. Yeah. So you just have to get it to where it's yep, this is essentially where I want it to be, and let it go from there. Because no matter how much you try, how much you might think it's perfect, you're going to send your paper to review, and we all know reviewer number 2 is going to have the laundry list of things they want for you to do. So it's never going to be yeah, this is great, we're going to publish it as is. I don't know anybody who that's happened to. It certainly hasn't happened to me. So.
Yeah. Well, I love that. F at the essence is there. I think that's going to be a
Is that our title?
Made into a t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, totally. We do have a Boom fashion line, so we can make it happen. We'll give credits to you in the...
And this anonymous musician. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
it's anonymous. Yeah. I don't know if you're referring to, so there's a book called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, I believe. And that's, I just wanted to give a little pitch to that book because I think that also highlighted what you were speaking on. And that was a book that I really enjoyed reading.
Yeah, it probably was that one because I have read Brene Brown. So now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably where the term imperfectionist came from. So, yeah.
Kind of on that note, could you tell us about a time where perhaps you felt like you failed or a time that you felt particularly imperfect and what you learned from it?
Oh, goodness. There have been so many. Yeah, it's, it's funny because academia is such a judgmental space in so many ways. Like everything we do is judged. If you're teaching, your students evaluate your teaching. When you go up for tenure or promotion, someone's judging you, basically. Your students are judging you. Your tenure committee's judging you. Your reviewers for grant applications, papers, abstracts, everybody is judging you all the time. So it's hard not to feel like that a lot. I don't know that I have necessarily like a particular time when, because there's probably several, but I've through the years tried to view these as like, remember that they're learning experiences, that like most mistakes are not catastrophic and going to lead to the end of your career. They're just opportunities to learn something and to do better next time. And so trying to remind myself of that when I do start to feel the weight of those things is that, yes, this is, the judgment of others, but they may not always have all the information, or that's their perception, but there are also, all right, maybe here's one specific example. Student evaluations of your teaching. You tend to see the ones that are like, this was awful. But you have to remember that there, in a class of 100 students, there are like 2 or 3 that might have something like that to say. There are 2 or 3 who might say this was like the best course I ever took and Dr. Azar is the best teacher ever. And then there's like 95 of them who just had a decent enough experience and have nothing to say. Like it was okay. And like, but you like forget about that. And so trying to focus on the radio silence is probably from people who are like, yeah, it was fine. Like, it wasn't the best course I ever took, but it wasn't the worst one I ever took. And just, like, remembering that. That's, probably somewhere in the middle for most people.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can still learn something from the others. Like, that's not to say you dismiss it necessarily, but, you don't have to laser focus on those extremes that,
That's such a good point. I was two boys I used to babysit for here. Now they're all they're grown up and they're about to go to college. And we were reviewing some reviews about professors. They were trying to figure out what courses to take, and one was just like, "I hate this professor, and this professor hates me," and that's just what it is. And I was just like, "Oh my! If I ever got a review like that, I don't know how I would cope." But at the same time, kind of what you're saying in terms of there's always going to be those. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with, what you're doing or your class or you, and trying to not, I think, take some of those comments so personally. But like you're saying, kind of take what you want from those, what you can learn from it.
Yeah.
And then letting the rest.
Yeah, like try to distill, because underneath the anger and the frustration is someone's personal experience. And so trying to wade through that to find like, okay, what was it about this thing that was particularly a problem for this person, and see if there's anything, like in some cases it might not have been anything I can do about it. And unfortunately that just translated into a bad experience for them. But in some cases there might be like, oh, maybe if I did change this or that policy or this or that assignment, maybe it would be a better experience for everyone. And, you might be able to find something in it. But yeah, trying to, remove the emotion from it and just look at what can I actually take from this is hard to do, but you try to remind yourself to do it.
It just shows we're like so not good at like feeling statistics, right? We feel those extremes, but like it tells us that 95% is such an overwhelming. Well, I think we're coming up on our last question, but first, how can people follow you in your work?
Oh,
we talked about your social media accounts, but yeah.
I appreciate that. So
love them.
The best place to follow is social media. We post, especially for the live energy expenditure stuff, we post all of that like regularly as they happen. But I do post about study announcements and publications and things like that there. And my link tree that it has links to, conference posters, papers, whatever. Those are in my social media bio. So my handle for all of them is at Dr. Nadia Azar. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter are the primary ones. I'm slowly dabbling into TikTok, or I'm going to try.
Wow.
But we'll see how that goes. But so and that one's also at Dr. Nadia Azar. So that's the best place. I do have a faculty webpage, but I don't have as much control over that as I do like my link tree. So that's the best place to find links to new publications or, things like that. And those are all on my social media.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll put that link in the show notes.
Awesome.
All right, and so for our last question, what are you most excited about for the future of biomechanics?
Ooh, I don't know. They're so excited about, or maybe slightly daunted by too, but there's so much potential for advancement with technology. Every time you think you're at the peak of it, something else comes along. Things like, and this is well beyond my wheelhouse, but like AI, or, even augmented reality for putting people in simulations in the lab and things like that. I just think there's so much potential technology-wise. I also love where things are going with, I saw on Twitter, a colleague at, I think McMaster had posted, they're looking for people to do a study where you need someone to videotape you with like your iPhone, but doing certain, like a squat, a lift, or this or that, and send it to them because they're working on this like motion capture stuff, markerless through an iPhone. So, taking what we know about all those things and now being able to distill it down into like your pocket computer to take it anywhere and have it be reasonably accurate and valid is so exciting, because it opens up so many possibilities for so many sports that and other movements that are really hard to recreate in the lab. Like, for example, so we use the XN's motion capture system in my lab, and XN's, they've been able to get data on ski jumpers, on rowers out on the water. Like, none of that is replicable in a lab. So, to have, and even the XN's, as great and as portable as it is, it's still, there's still the IMUs, inertial measurement units, the monitoring devices that you have to attach and things like that. So, to be able to distill it down even further, but still have it be accurate and reliable, is really exciting. And I think it'll open that many more doors to answering that many more questions, and helping that many more people.
Love that. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, that's, I think, what's really exciting for us too, and just the impact that technology like that can have. But then it's also amazing to see all of the many different applications and uses for it as it expands. And I think this has been such a fun interview and application that we hadn't talked about before, but is very important, and I think also has so many learnings that can be translated to so many other areas. So we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about your work. It was really nice to meet you, and it's really, really exciting things that you're doing. And we hope that maybe we'll have to come collect data with you sometime.
Yeah, if you ever need an extra hand, if your husband wants a break.
There is a long list of people who told me. No, thank you both for inviting me to be on the podcast. It was really fun to talk to you both, and I'm happy to field questions and that sort of thing if anyone hears this and whatnot, they can reach out to me through social media and, that sort of thing. But yeah, thank you for doing this and bringing biomechanics out into the world. It's exciting.
Yes, we love doing it. So thank you.
Good. All right. Thank you both so much.
Biomechanics off our minds.